The blood on her hands had dried black against the pale blue of her skin, but Zarathex could still smell the metallic tang of death clinging to her like a second shadow. She pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the cargo bay, listening to the hum of the ship's engines as they carried her away from Nexus Prime and the 47th life she had taken. 47. Each death carved into her memory with surgical precision, just as her creators had intended. The hegemony had engineered her to be perfect. 7 feet of lean muscle and razor-sharp reflexes, with eyes that could see in complete darkness and hands that could crush bone or pick a lock with equal ease. They had given her everything except the one thing that might have made the killing easier: the ability to forget. "Target eliminated," she reported into her wrist communicator, her voice as empty as the void between stars. "Senator Vex will not be voting against the mining rights bill." The response crackled through immediately, cold and familiar. "Excellent work, Asset 7. Return to base for debriefing and your next assignment." Asset 7. Not Zarathex. That name was a whisper from her childhood, before the surgeries, before the conditioning, before they had turned her into something that existed only to kill. The Syndicate had tried to erase even that small piece of her identity, but she held on to it like a drowning woman clutching driftwood. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Zara felt the familiar knot of emptiness tighten in her chest. Another successful mission, another step deeper into the darkness that had swallowed her whole. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to choose something, anything, for herself. But memories like that were dangerous. The conditioning had taught her that hope was weakness, that attachment meant death, that the only truth in the universe was the weight of the weapon in her hand. She had learned these lessons through pain, through starvation, through watching other failed experiments scream themselves into madness in the cells next to hers. The cargo bay door hissed open, revealing the familiar gray corridors of the Syndicate base on Kepler Station. Director Voss stood waiting, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on her. He was the closest thing to a father she had ever known, which made him the cruelest person in her universe. 7, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "We have a problem." Zara straightened, every muscle ready for violence. Problems, in the director's vocabulary, usually meant someone was about to die. "What kind of problem?" "Intelligence indicates that Admiral Corsair has been gathering information about our assets. He's getting close to uncovering Operation Nightfall." Voss's organic "I never blinked, never showed mercy." "We need him eliminated before he can report to the Alliance Council." The Alliance. Zara had heard whispers about their growing influence, their crusade to bring law and order to the frontier worlds. They represented everything the Syndicate opposed: accountability, justice, the quaint notion that some lives were worth more than the credits they could generate. "Where?" she asked. "Haven's Rest, a backwater agricultural colony in the Outer Rim. Corsair thinks he's safe there, surrounded by farmers and botanists." Voss smiled, and the expression made her skin crawl. "Show him how wrong he is." Haven's Rest. The name meant nothing to her. But then again, most of the worlds she visited were just coordinates on a star chart, temporary stops on her endless journey through other people's blood. She had never stayed anywhere long enough to learn the names of the flowers or the taste of the local water. "Understood," she said, turning toward the armory. 7. Voss's voice stopped her at the threshold. "The Admiral has been investigating us for 3 years. He's seen footage of your work, studied your methods. He'll be expecting you. A warning or perhaps a challenge." With Voss, it was often impossible to tell the difference. "That won't matter." "No," he agreed. "It won't. But be careful anyway. You're too valuable to lose to overconfidence." Valuable. The word followed her through the ship's corridors like a curse. She was valuable the way a knife was valuable, the way a bomb was valuable. Useful until she broke, then easily replaced. The Syndicate had other assets, other experiments growing in their laboratories. She had seen them during her brief returns to base, pale creatures with empty eyes and steady hands, waiting for their turn to graduate from training dummies to living targets. But none of them were like her. None of them carried 47 deaths in their heart and still functioned. None of them had survived 20 years of missions that should have killed them a dozen times over. She was unique, and that uniqueness was both her strength and her prison. The transport ship was small and fast, designed for stealth rather than comfort. As the stars blurred past the viewport, Zara checked her weapons one final time. 2 plasma pistols, a monomolecular blade, 3 different types of poison, and her own body, trained since childhood to be a weapon more deadly than any technology. Haven's Rest appeared on the navigation display as a small green orbiting a yellow star. Population, 12,000. Primary exports, agricultural products and rare botanicals. Military presence, minimal. It looked peaceful, almost innocent, like a place where people might actually live instead of merely surviving. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was about to bring death to a world named for peace. Haven's Rest looked like a painting from the old Earth museums. Rolling green hills dotted with farms, crystal-clear rivers winding through valleys thick with wildflowers, and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Zara had seen 1,000 worlds, but most of them were industrial hellscapes or sterile space stations where the air tasted like recycled fear. This place was different. This place was alive. She dropped from her stealth ship at midnight, landing silently in a grove of trees that smelled like honey and rain. Her enhanced vision cut through the darkness, mapping every shadow, every potential threat. But there were no guards, no sensor arrays, no military installations. Just farmers sleeping peacefully in houses with unlocked doors and windows open to the night air. The intelligence packet had been thorough. Admiral Corsair was staying at the home of Dr. Marcus Webb, a retired Alliance medical officer who now ran a small clinic in the town of Greendale. The 2 men had served together during the Titan War, and their friendship had survived the transition from military service to civilian life. It was exactly the kind of personal connection that the syndicate would exploit. Zara moved through the settlement like a ghost, her footsteps silent on the dirt roads. Garden gates stood open, tools left unattended on porches, children's toys scattered in yards. The trust was staggering, almost offensive to someone who had spent her entire life in a universe where trust meant death. She found the clinic easily, a modest building with solar panels on the roof and flowers growing in window boxes. Through the thermal imaging in her cybernetic implants, she could see 2 heat signatures on the 2nd floor. One was moving restlessly, unable to sleep. The other was still, breathing with the deep rhythm of peaceful dreams. Getting inside took 30 seconds. The lock was barely more sophisticated than the ones they used on storage sheds. Zara slipped through the ground floor, past examination rooms filled with medical equipment that looked well used but carefully maintained. Everything spoke of a man who cared about his work, who saw healing as more than just a job. The stairs didn't creak. Her enhanced reflexes adjusted her weight distribution with each step, making her lighter than air, quieter than thought. At the top, she paused outside the first door, listening to the sound of someone typing on a data pad. Admiral Corsair, working late into the night, probably reviewing the evidence that would destroy the only life she had ever known. She should have felt something, anticipation, professional satisfaction, even fear. Instead, there was only the familiar emptiness, the void where her emotions should have been. The conditioning had burned most of them out of her years ago, leaving behind only the ones that served her function. Alertness, precision, the ability to kill without hesitation. The door handle turned silently in her hand. The room beyond was small and comfortable, with bookshelves lining the walls and a desk positioned near the window. Admiral Corsair sat with his back to her, gray hair catching the light from his data pad as he scrolled through files. He was younger than she had expected, maybe 50 standard years, with the kind of weathered face that came from making hard decisions in impossible situations. "I've been waiting for you," he said without turning around. Zara froze, her hand halfway to her weapon. In her peripheral vision, she could see his reflection in the window, calm, alert, but not afraid. "Admiral, Asset 7, isn't it? Or do you prefer Zarathex?" He closed the data pad and turned to face her, and she saw eyes that held more sadness than fear. "I've been studying you for a long time. Your work is distinctive. You're supposed to be asleep." The words came out flat, professional. She had killed people who were awake before, but it was always messier, more complicated. Sleep doesn't come easily when you know someone like you is coming. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Would you like to sit? We have a few minutes before you kill me. The offer caught her off guard. In 20 years of assassinations, no target had ever invited her to sit down. They ran, they fought, they begged, they tried to bargain. None of them had ever offered her a chair like she was a guest instead of a weapon. I'm not here to talk, she said. I know, but I am. Corsair leaned back in his chair, and she could see the weight of exhaustion in his shoulders. 47 people, Zara. 47 lives cut short because someone paid the syndicate enough credits. Do you ever think about them? The question hit her like a physical blow. Of course she thought about them. Their faces haunted her dreams, when she was still capable of dreaming. Their last words echoed in her mind during the long hyperspace journeys between missions. But thinking about them was weakness, and weakness was death. They were targets, she said. Nothing more. Senator Kellygon had 3 children. Did you know that? The youngest was only 6 years old when you put that poison in his coffee. Corsair's voice never rose, never became accusatory. It was worse than anger, it was pity. Chancellor Voss had just gotten married. She was planning to retire from politics and start a family. Stop! The word came out sharper than she intended. Dr. Ilara Chun was working on a cure for Martian plague. Her research died with her. He stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible. They weren't just targets, Zara. They were people with hopes and dreams and families who loved them. I said stop. Her hand was on her weapon now, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. But something was wrong. Her fingers felt clumsy, uncertain. The familiar weight of the plasma pistol seemed alien in her grip. You know what I found most interesting in all my research? Corsair moved to the window, looking out at the peaceful town below. You never kill civilians. In 20 years, 47 confirmed assassinations, and every single target was either a politician, a corporate executive, or a military officer. Never a shopkeeper, never a teacher, never a parent walking their child to school. The syndicate chooses the targets. The syndicate gives you a name and pays you to kill them. But you choose how to do it, when to do it, and whether to follow through. He turned back to her, and she saw something in his eyes that she didn't recognize. Hope. You still have a choice, Zara. You've always had a choice. The words hit her like a sledgehammer to the chest. Choice. Such a simple concept, so utterly foreign to everything she had been taught. The conditioning screamed at her to end this conversation, to complete the mission, to return to the familiar certainty of following orders. But for the first time in 20 years, she hesitated. The hesitation lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough. Admiral Corsair saw it, and his expression shifted from resignation to something that might have been understanding. You don't want to kill me. What I want is irrelevant. Zara's training reasserted itself, cold and absolute. You have information that threatens the syndicate. You die tonight. The information is already transmitted. Corsair's voice remained steady, matter-of-fact. I sent my files to the Alliance Council 3 hours ago. Killing me won't stop what's coming. The admission should have changed nothing. Dead was dead, whether the mission served a purpose or not. But something twisted in her chest, a feeling she couldn't name. 47 deaths, and this would be the first one that accomplished nothing except satisfying the syndicate's need for revenge. Then you die for nothing, she said. No. He moved closer, and every instinct screamed at her to strike. Instead, she found herself taking a step back. I die so that you might finally understand what choice means. Her weapon cleared its holster in a motion too fast for human eyes to follow. The plasma bolt would have taken his head off, should have ended the conversation and the mission in one clean burst of superheated gas. But her hand betrayed her, tilting just enough that the shot went wide, burning a hole in the wall behind him. Corsair didn't flinch. You missed. I don't miss. The words came out strangled, foreign. Asset 7 didn't miss. Asset 7 was perfect, precise, a living weapon that had never failed to complete a mission. But Zarathex, my name, she whispered. the words torn from her throat like pieces of her soul. "You used my name. It's a beautiful name. It means morning star in the old Centauri dialect, doesn't it?" Corsair sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 50 years. "The Syndicate tried to take that from you too, but you held on to it. Why? Because it was all she had left. Because it was the only thing that proved she had existed before they made her into this. Because in her darkest moments, when the weight of 47 deaths threatened to crush what remained of her sanity, she could whisper it to herself and remember that once, somewhere, someone had loved her enough to give her a name that meant light. She couldn't say any of that. The words would have been weakness, and weakness was death. But her weapon hand was shaking now, trembling like a leaf in a storm, and she couldn't make it stop. "You're broken," Corsair said gently. "Not physically, they built you too well for that. But inside, where it matters, you're coming apart. How long since you slept without nightmares? How long since you felt anything except emptiness?" "I feel nothing because I choose to feel nothing." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. The conditioning had taken her emotions and buried them deep, but they were still there, writhing like living things in the darkness of her mind. Bullshit. The profanity was so unexpected, so utterly at odds with his calm demeanor, that she actually recoiled. "You feel everything. Every death, every moment of pain you've caused, every life you've stolen. It's eating you alive from the inside." Her legs gave out. She found herself sitting on the floor, back against the wall, weapon loose in her trembling hands. 20 years of perfect control, and it was all falling apart because one old man had looked at her and seen a person instead of a weapon. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't stop. They'll kill me." "Maybe." Corsair stood up and moved to a small cabinet, pulling out a bottle and 2 glasses. "But maybe living as yourself for one day is worth dying for." He poured amber liquid into both glasses and set one within her reach. The gesture was insane, offering alcohol to an assassin who had come to kill him. But everything about this night had been insane from the moment she walked through his door. "What is it?" she asked. "Whiskey. From Earth before the evacuation. Dr. Webb has been saving it for special occasions." He raised his glass in a mock toast. "I can't think of anything more special than an assassin having a crisis of conscience." The whiskey burned her throat, but it was a clean burn, nothing like the acid taste of the combat stims the Syndicate fed her. For a moment, she almost remembered what it felt like to be human. "Tell me about them," she said suddenly. "The people I killed. Their real names, not just their titles." Corsair studied her face for a long moment, then set his glass aside. "Senator Marcus Kelly gone. He was 63, had been in politics for 30 years. His wife died of cancer 2 years before you killed him, and he was raising their 3 children alone. The youngest, Sarah, used to draw pictures of spaceships and dream of becoming an explorer. Each word was a knife between her ribs, but she didn't stop him. She needed to hear this, needed to understand the weight of what she had done. Chancellor Rebecca Voss. She was a reformer trying to clean up the corruption in the colonial parliament. Her husband was a teacher, and they were planning to have children once her term ended. She kept a garden on the roof of her apartment building, tomatoes and peppers and flowers that reminded her of home. The names kept coming, each one accompanied by details that transformed them from targets into people. A judge who coached youth soccer on weekends. A corporate whistleblower who donated most of his salary to orphanages. A military officer who had saved 17 lives during the siege of Proxima Station. 47 people. 47 lives cut short so that the Syndicate could maintain its stranglehold on the galaxy's throat. And she had been the knife in their hand, sharp and obedient and utterly without mercy. "Why?" The question came out broken, barely more than a breath. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone needs to remember them as people, not just casualties." Corsair knelt beside her, close enough that she could have killed him a dozen different ways. "And because you need to understand that you're a person too, not just a weapon." The tears came without warning, burning tracks down her face like acid. She hadn't cried since childhood, before the surgeries, before they had rewired her brain to suppress everything soft and human. But now the dam was breaking, 20 years of buried grief and guilt and desperate longing pouring out in great, racking sobs. Corsair didn't try to comfort her, didn't offer empty words or false absolution. He simply sat with her while she fell apart, a quiet presence in the darkness that was somehow more healing than any medicine. When the tears finally stopped, she felt hollow but strangely lighter, as if something poisonous had been drained from her veins. "What happens now?" "Now you choose," he said. "You can complete your mission, return to the Syndicate, and spend the rest of your life as Asset 7. Or you can walk away." "Walk away to what? I'm not human anymore. I don't know how to be anything except what they made me." "Then learn." He stood up and moved to the window again, looking out at the sleeping town. "There are people here who could teach you. Good people who see the best in everyone, even broken assassins with too much blood on their hands." A sound from outside made them both freeze. Footsteps on gravel, moving with military precision. Her enhanced hearing picked up the whisper of advanced combat armor, the barely audible hum of powered weapons. The Syndicate had found her. "Get down!" Zara moved faster than thought, tackling Corsair to the floor just as the window exploded inward in a shower of glass and plasma fire. The shots came from 3 different angles: rooftops, street level, and what sounded like a hovering aircraft. Professional. Coordinated. Familiar. They had sent a retrieval team. "Why?" Corsair started to ask, but she pressed a hand over his mouth, listening to the tactical chatter bleeding through her comm implant. "Asset 7 compromised. Authorization to terminate if necessary. Priority is data recovery from the target." Data recovery. They weren't here to extract her anymore. They were here to clean up loose ends, and she had just become one of them. "Bathroom," she whispered, helping Corsair to his feet. "Back wall, away from windows." They crawled across the floor as more plasma bolts punched through the walls around them. The room was filling with smoke and the acrid smell of burning electronics. Zara's mind raced through tactical assessments: 6 shooters minimum, heavy weapons, full tactical gear. They had come prepared for a war. But they had made one critical mistake. They thought she was still Asset 7, the obedient weapon who would never turn against her creators. They didn't know that something fundamental had changed in the last hour, that the perfect killer they had created was finally learning to choose. In the bathroom, she pressed her back against the wall and checked her weapons. 2 plasma pistols, the monomolecular blade, and her bare hands. Against a full Syndicate tactical team, it should have been suicide. But Asset 7 had been designed to be the perfect killer, and that perfection worked both ways. "They're not here for me," Corsair said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "They're here to kill both of us." The moment I hesitated, I became a liability. She ejected the power cell from her comm implant, crushing it between her fingers. The Syndicate doesn't tolerate imperfection. The sound of boots on the stairs made them both freeze. They were coming up, slow and methodical, sweeping each room. Professional soldiers doing a professional job. She had worked with men like these, had been one of them. She knew their tactics, their training, their weaknesses, but she had never fought them. "Thomas." The voice drifted up from the ground floor, artificially amplified. "Dr. Thomas Chun, we know you're harboring a dangerous fugitive. Surrender her, and you'll be allowed to live." Zara felt the world stop. Thomas Chun. They weren't talking to Corsair, they were talking to someone else. Someone who wasn't supposed to be here, who had nothing to do with assassins and syndicates and the bloody mathematics of murder. "Who is Thomas Chan?" she whispered. Corsair's face had gone pale. "My host. He owns this building, the clinic downstairs, the apartment upstairs. He should be asleep in his greenhouse." "How do they?" A new voice cut through the night, calm and unafraid. "I'm here. Let me talk to her." "No," Zara breathed. Someone innocent was about to walk into a war zone because of her. Someone who had nothing to do with any of this was about to die because she had failed to complete her mission. She moved before conscious thought could stop her, flowing through the bathroom door like liquid shadow. The first tactical operative was halfway up the stairs, weapon raised, scanning for targets. He never saw her coming. The monomolecular blade parted his armor like paper, sliding between the joints with surgical precision. She caught his body before it could fall, lowering it silently to the stairs. His weapon, a military-grade pulse rifle, felt familiar and deadly in her hands. 2 more operatives were moving through the ground floor. She could hear them through the floorboards, their careful footsteps mapping the layout of the clinic. They were good, but they had never fought someone like her. They had never fought someone who knew their every move before they made it. She dropped through the ceiling like an angel of death, landing between them in the examination room. The first one had time to raise his weapon. The second one died with her blade through his throat before he even knew she was there. Contact. Asset 7 is hostile. Repeat. Asset 7 is hostile. The radio chatter exploded into chaos as the remaining team members realized their quarry had become their hunter. She smiled, and it was the first genuine expression she had felt in years. This combat, violence, the deadly dance of predator and prey. This was what they had made her for. But for the first time, she was choosing her own targets. The front door of the clinic burst open, and she caught a glimpse of movement in the garden beyond. Someone was walking up the path. A tall, thin figure with graying hair and gentle hands that probably hadn't held a weapon in decades. Thomas Chen. The man who was about to die because he had the misfortune to own a building where an assassin had discovered her conscience. "Stay back!" she shouted. But he kept coming, moving with the steady purpose of someone who had made up his mind. A plasma bolt from the roof caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He stumbled but didn't fall, didn't run, didn't even cry out. He just looked at her through the shattered doorway with eyes that held no fear, no anger, only concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The question was so unexpected, so utterly wrong for the situation, that she almost forgot to duck as another sniper round shattered the window behind her. Someone was shooting at her, people were dying, and this stranger's first thought was whether she was injured. "Get down!" she screamed, but he was already moving. Not away from the danger, but toward it, toward her. A grenade rolled through the front door, military-grade explosive that would level half the building. She had maybe 3 seconds before it detonated. 3 seconds to save the life of a man who had walked into hell to ask if she was okay. She didn't think. She moved. Her enhanced reflexes carried her across the room in a single bound, tackling Thomas Chan to the ground and covering his body with her own, just as the world exploded into fire and pain. The blast lifted them both, slamming them against the far wall with enough force to shatter normal bones. But Asset 7 had been built to survive. The pain was enormous, overwhelming, but survivable. She could feel blood running down her face, taste smoke and copper and the bitter residue of high explosives. But she was alive. More importantly, so was he. "Thank you," Thomas whispered, and she realized he was cradling her head in his hands, trying to shield her from the falling debris. "Thank you for trying to protect me." Through the ringing in her ears, she could hear boots on broken glass. The surviving operatives were moving in for the kill, and she was in no condition to fight. Her weapons were scattered, her body was screaming in protest, and the man she had tried to save was bleeding from a dozen cuts. But Thomas Chun was looking at her like she was something precious instead of something monstrous, and for the first time in 20 years, Zarathex felt like she might be worth saving. "Can you move?" she asked. "I think so." He helped her sit up, and she saw that his hands were steady despite the blood and the chaos. "But I'm not leaving you. You have to. They're coming to kill us both. Then we face them together." He smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "My name is Thomas, by the way. Thomas Chen. I grow things." "Zarathex," she said, and speaking her real name felt like coming home. "I kill things." "Well," he said as the footsteps got closer, "maybe it's time you learned a different skill." Thomas Chen's greenhouse stood at the edge of his property like a cathedral made of glass and light, somehow untouched by the violence that had shattered his clinic. Zara half-carried, half-dragged him through the back door as plasma fire lit up the night behind them, her enhanced vision cutting through the darkness to find the path between neat rows of vegetables and medicinal herbs. "Here," Thomas gasped, pointing toward a section of floor that looked different from the rest. Emergency shelter. Built it during the war. She found the hidden panel and pulled it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The shelter was small but well-stocked. Medical supplies, food, water, and most importantly, thick walls that would block thermal scans and muffle sound. As she sealed the entrance above them, she could hear the syndicate operatives spreading out through the property, their tactical chatter filtering through her damaged comm implant. They knew she was wounded, knew she had a civilian with her, and they were closing the net with methodical precision. "Why?" she asked as she helped Thomas sit down on a supply crate. "Why did you come for me?" He was pale from blood loss, but his hands were steady as he opened a medical kit and began treating the plasma burn on his shoulder. "I heard the shooting, saw the tactical team moving in. Someone was in trouble. Someone was a professional killer who came here to murder your friend. Were you?" He looked at her with those impossibly calm eyes. "Because from where I was standing, it looked like someone was trying to protect people." She stared at him, this impossible man who saw goodness where none existed. "I've killed 47 people, Thomas. I came here to make it 48. But you didn't." He finished bandaging his wound and moved to examine the cuts on her face. "Corsair is still alive, isn't he?" The gentle touch of his fingers made her flinch. No one had touched her with kindness since. She couldn't remember when. Since before the syndicate, before the surgeries, before they had turned her into a weapon. His hands were warm and careful, tending her injuries like she was something worth saving instead of something that should be destroyed. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "That's okay. I don't understand me either most of the time." He cleaned the blood from a gash on her forehead, his movements professional and sure. "I'm a botanist, Zara. I spend my days nurturing things, helping them grow. When I see something broken, something hurting, my instinct is to try to heal it. I'm not a plant. I'm a weapon. You're a person." His voice was firm, gentle, absolutely certain. A person who has been hurt very badly, but still a person. Above them, she could hear the operatives moving through his greenhouse, their boots heavy on the metal walkways between his carefully tended plants. They were searching systematically, professionally, but they hadn't found the shelter yet. Soon, though, she had maybe minutes before they detected the hidden entrance. "Thomas." She caught his hand as he reached for another bandage. "They're going to find us. When they do, I need you to stay behind me. Don't try to help, don't try to protect me. Just stay alive." "What are you going to do?" She checked her remaining weapons, one plasma pistol with a half-depleted power cell, the monomolecular blade, and her own body. Against trained operatives with superior numbers and equipment, it wouldn't be enough. But Asset 7 had been designed to fight impossible odds. The difference was, this time she wasn't fighting for the syndicate. She was fighting for something she had never had before. Someone who saw her as more than a weapon. "I'm going to give you a chance to run." She moved toward the shelter entrance, listening to the footsteps above. "There's a service tunnel that connects to the irrigation system. Follow it to the river, then get to town. Tell them what happened here. I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." She turned to face him, and for the first time in 20 years, she let someone see the fear in her eyes. "Because if you die, then everything I've done tonight, everything I've chosen, means nothing. You're my proof that there's still something good in the universe, Thomas. Don't take that away from me." He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the exact instant when he understood. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about redemption, about the possibility that even someone like her could choose to be something better. "How do I find you afterward?" he asked. "You don't. If I survive this, I run. The syndicate will never stop hunting me, and anyone who helps me becomes a target." She touched his face, memorizing the feeling of his skin against her palm. "But thank you for seeing me instead of what they made me into." "Zara." The entrance above them exploded inward in a shower of concrete and twisted metal. She pushed Thomas toward the service tunnel and threw herself up the stairs, emerging into chaos and gunfire and the familiar symphony of violence. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't Asset 7, the perfect killer following orders. She was Zarathex, and she was fighting for something worth dying for. The first operative never saw her coming. She moved like liquid death, the monomolecular blade finding the gap in his armor with surgical precision. His weapon, a military pulse rifle, felt familiar in her hands as she rolled behind a workbench and started returning fire. Target acquired. Basement level. The tactical chatter was professional, emotionless, exactly like her own voice had been for 20 years. But now she could hear the fear underneath it, the uncertainty of soldiers who had never faced one of their own weapons turned against them. She smiled as she put 3 rounds center mass into the second operative, watching him fall among Thomas's carefully tended tomato plants. The irony wasn't lost on her. Death among things meant to give life. Asset 7, stand down. The voice came from the greenhouse entrance, artificially amplified and coldly familiar. Director Voss stepped into view, his cybernetic eye gleaming in the emergency lighting. You are malfunctioning. Return for reconditioning. My name, she said, rolling to a new position as sniper fire shattered the glass above her head, is Zarathex. That name died 20 years ago. Voss moved deeper into the greenhouse, flanked by 2 more operatives. You are Asset 7. You belong to the Syndicate. You will complete your mission and return to base. She could see Thomas in her peripheral vision, crawling through the service tunnel toward safety. Good. Whatever happened next, at least he would survive. At least her choice would mean something. I belong to no one, she said, and put a plasma bolt through the chest of the operative on Voss's left. The director didn't even flinch as his soldier fell. Disappointing. The psychological conditioning was supposed to prevent this kind of deviation. He raised his own weapon, a custom plasma rifle that she recognized from her own armory. No matter. We have other assets in development. Younger ones. More pliable. The words hit her like physical blows. Other weapons being forged in the Syndicate's laboratories, other children being twisted into killers. How many more like her would they create? How many more lives would be destroyed to feed their endless hunger for power? Not if I stop you, she whispered. Voss laughed, and the sound was colder than the void between stars. You? Your damaged goods. 7. A broken tool that needs to be discarded. He gestured to his remaining operative. Kill her. The soldier raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. But Zara was already moving, 20 years of training and genetic enhancement flowing through her like liquid fire. She came up from behind the workbench like an avenging angel, the monomolecular blades singing through the air. The operative's head separated from his shoulders in a fountain of blood that painted Thomas's prize-winning orchids crimson. But even as he fell, Voss was moving, his cybernetic enhancements making him faster than any normal human. The plasma bolt caught her in the side, spinning her around and slamming her into a support beam. Pain exploded through her torso, white-hot and overwhelming. She could smell burning flesh, could feel her enhanced healing systems struggling to cope with the damage. 20 years, Voss said, walking slowly toward her. 20 years of perfect service. And you throw it all away for what? A moment of conscience? The approval of some backwater farmer. She tried to raise her weapon, but her arm wouldn't respond. The plasma burn had severed something important, left her right side numb and useless. Blood was pooling beneath her, more blood than even her enhanced body could afford to lose. He saw me, she gasped. Not Asset 7. Not the weapon you made. Me. Sentiment. Voss knelt beside her, close enough that she could see her own reflection in his cybernetic eye. The final flaw in all our designs. We can enhance the body, condition the mind, but we can never quite kill the heart. He pressed the muzzle of his rifle against her forehead. Consider this a learning experience for our next generation of assets. The shot never came. Instead, Voss jerked backward, his weapon clattering across the floor as something struck him from behind. Thomas Chun stood in the greenhouse doorway, holding a shovel like a weapon, his face set in lines of absolute determination. She's not a tool, he said quietly. She's a person, and I won't let you hurt her anymore. Voss spun around, his hand going to the combat knife at his belt. The civilian. How convenient. We can clean up both loose ends at once. But Thomas wasn't backing down. Despite having no combat training, no enhanced reflexes, no weapons except a garden tool, he stepped between Zara and the director like he was ready to fight the entire galaxy for her. "Thomas, run," she whispered, but he shook his head. "I told you," he said, never taking his eyes off Voss. "We face this together." The director moved like lightning, the combat knife flashing toward Thomas's throat. But Zara had one more miracle left in her. Her left hand, still functional despite the plasma burn, found her last weapon. The small holdout pistol hidden in her boot. The shot took Voss center mass, the plasma bolt punching through his armor and into his chest cavity. He staggered, looking down at the smoking hole in his torso with something that might have been surprise. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're dying." "Yes," Zara agreed, feeling her strength ebbing with each heartbeat. "But I'm choosing how." Voss fell to his knees, then forward onto his face, his cybernetic eye going dark. The greenhouse fell silent except for the distant sound of sirens. Local law enforcement finally responding to the battle that had torn through their peaceful community. Thomas dropped the shovel and knelt beside her, his hands gentle as he tried to assess her injuries. "Hold on," he said. "Help is coming. The medical center has a trauma unit and I know the doctors. They can save you." She smiled up at him, memorizing his face in the dim light filtering through the shattered glass roof. "I don't think so, Thomas. But that's okay. I got to choose in the end. I got to choose to save someone instead of killing them." "Don't talk like that." His voice was breaking, and she realized he was crying. When was the last time someone had cried for her? "You're going to be fine. You're going to live and learn how to grow things instead of destroying them." "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like to learn about flowers, about things that bloom in the light instead of dying in the darkness." The sirens were getting closer, along with the sound of voices calling out, people coming to help. Thomas's community, rallying to protect one of their own. It was beautiful in a way. She had never been part of something like that, had never known what it felt like to belong somewhere. "Zara." Thomas took her hand, holding it carefully like it was made of spun glass. "What's your favorite color?" The question was so unexpected, so perfectly normal, that she almost laughed. I don't know. I don't think I've ever thought about it." "Well, when you're better, we'll figure it out together. I'll show you every flower in my greenhouse, every color in the spectrum, until you find the one that makes you smile." "Blue," she said suddenly, "like the sky on this world. Like hope. Blue it is." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'll plant a whole garden of blue flowers. Delphiniums and cornflowers and morning glories that climb toward the sun." The darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision, but she held onto his voice like an anchor. For the first time in 20 years, she wasn't afraid of dying. She had made her choice, had saved someone worth saving, had discovered that even weapons could learn to love. "Thomas," she whispered, "I'm here. Thank you for seeing me, for helping me remember who I was before they broke me." "You were never broken," he said firmly. "Just lost. But you found your way home." Home. Such a simple word, but it contained everything she had never known she wanted. Peace. Acceptance. The chance to be something other than a killer. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine it. Waking up in a place where no one was afraid of her, where she could spend her days nurturing life instead of ending it. The sirens were very close now, and she could hear footsteps on the gravel outside. Soon, the greenhouse would be full of medics and police officers and all the complicated machinery of civilization trying to make sense of what had happened here. But for now, in this moment between heartbeats, it was just her and Thomas and the quiet understanding that sometimes the most broken things could still choose to heal. "Will you tell them?" she asked. "About the others? The children in the syndicate laboratories?" "I'll tell them everything," he promised. "Admiral Corsair's files, your testimony, all of it. We'll make sure this never happens again." "Good." She smiled one last time, feeling something that might have been peace settling over her like a warm blanket. That's good. The darkness took her gently, carrying her away from pain and blood and the weight of 47 deaths. In her last conscious moment, she thought she could smell flowers blooming somewhere in the distance, their petals the exact color of hope. Zarathex woke up to the sound of rain pattering against glass and the soft beeping of medical monitors. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, or why her body felt like it had been disassembled and put back together with unfamiliar parts. Then memory crashed over her like a wave. The mission, the choice, the battle in Thomas's greenhouse. She was alive. The realization was so overwhelming that she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but lie there and feel her heart beating in her chest. Asset 7 was supposed to be dead, killed by Director Voss in a greenhouse full of flowers. But somehow, impossibly, Zarathex had survived. "You're awake." The voice was familiar, warm, tinged with exhaustion and relief. Thomas Chun sat in a chair beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "The doctors weren't sure you'd make it. Your injuries were extensive." She tried to speak, but her throat felt like sandpaper. He must have seen her struggle because he reached for a cup of water, helping her sit up enough to drink. The liquid was cool and clean, tasting of nothing but itself, no chemicals, no medications, just water. "How long?" she managed to ask. 6 days. You've been in and out of consciousness, but this is the first time you've seemed really aware." He set the cup aside and studied her face. "How do you feel?" She took inventory of her body, cataloging the damage and repairs. Her right side was wrapped in surgical dressings, and she could feel the dull ache of healing tissue beneath. Her enhanced healing factor had done its work, but the plasma burn had been severe enough to require extensive medical intervention. "Different," she said finally. "I feel different. The doctors had to remove some of your combat implants, the ones that were damaged beyond repair." Thomas's voice was carefully neutral, but she could hear the question underneath. "Are you angry about that?" Was she? The implants had been part of her for so long that she couldn't remember what it felt like to be without them. Enhanced reflexes, tactical overlays, chemical suppressors that kept her emotions in check. All of it gone, leaving behind something that felt smaller but somehow more real. "No," she said, and realized she meant it. "I think I'm relieved." Through the window, she could see Thomas's greenhouse in the distance, its glass panels reflecting the gray sky. Someone had cleaned up the battle damage and replanted the destroyed sections. Life continuing despite the violence that had tried to destroy it. "The Syndicate?" she asked. "Gone. Admiral Corsair's files, combined with your testimony and the evidence from the raid, were enough to bring down the entire organization. Turns out half the galaxy was looking for an excuse to move against them." Thomas leaned back in his chair, and she could see the weight of exhaustion in his shoulders. "There are still cells operating in the outer systems, but the main structure is finished. And the other assets? The children? Rescued? All of them?" His voice softened. 43 children between the ages of 8 and 16, pulled out of laboratories across 7 systems. They're getting help now. Real help, from people who understand what was done to them. 43 children who would never become what she had been. 43 lives saved because she had chosen to trust a stranger with gentle hands and eyes that saw good where none should exist. It wasn't enough to balance the scales of her past, but it was a beginning. "What happens to me now?" she asked. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him choosing his words carefully. "Officially, you're dead. Asset 7 died in that greenhouse, killed by Director Voss in the final confrontation. The authorities have all accepted that version of events. And unofficially?" He smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "Unofficially, there's a woman named Zara-chan who's been helping me with my botanical research. She's had some health problems lately, but she's recovering well, learning to tend a garden instead of other things. Chin." He was offering her his name, his protection, his life. The gesture was so enormous, so utterly beyond anything she could have imagined, that she couldn't speak for a moment. "I can't," she whispered. Thomas, you don't understand what I am, what I've done. I have 47 deaths on my hands. And now you have 43 lives saved to balance against them. He reached for her hand, holding it gently. I'm not asking you to forget your past, Zara. I'm asking you to help me build a future. She stared at their joined hands, her fingers pale and scarred from 20 years of violence, his stained with soil and plant matter from a lifetime of nurturing growth. They shouldn't have fit together, but somehow they did. I don't know how to be normal, she said. I don't know how to live without orders, without missions. What if I can't learn? Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time, one flower at a time. He squeezed her hand gently. I told you I'd show you every color in the spectrum until you found your favorite. That offer still stands. Through the window, she could see his garden stretching toward the horizon. Neat rows of vegetables and medicinal herbs, greenhouses full of exotic blooms, fruit trees heavy with the promise of harvest. It looked like peace made visible, like hope planted in rich soil and tended with patient hands. What would I do? She asked. I don't know anything except killing. You'd learn about soil composition and nutrient cycles and the life patterns of growing things, about how to coax seeds into sprouting and how to nurse sick plants back to health. His voice was warm with possibility, about how to create instead of destroy. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine it, her hands, which had only ever brought death, learning to bring life instead. Waking up each morning not to new targets and mission briefings, but to gardens that needed tending and plants that depended on her care. It seemed impossible, like a dream too beautiful to be real. The nightmares, she said. I still dream about them, the people I killed. What if that never stops? Then we'll face the nightmares together too. Thomas's voice was steady, certain. Healing isn't about forgetting, Zara. It's about learning to carry the weight without letting it crush you. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Admiral Corsair stepped into the room, moving carefully on a walking cane but otherwise looking healthier than she had expected. I hope I'm not intruding. Admiral. She tried to sit up straighter, but her body protested the movement. Just David, please. I'm retired now, officially this time. He looked between her and Thomas, and she saw understanding in his eyes. I wanted to thank you. What you did that night, choosing to save lives instead of taking them, it changed everything. I almost killed you, but you didn't. And that choice, that moment of hesitation, gave us everything we needed to bring down the syndicate. He moved to the window, looking out at the gardens. The children you saved are getting new identities, new families. They'll have a chance to grow up normal, to choose their own paths. What about the ones who were too far gone? The older assets who couldn't be saved? David's expression grew sad but determined. We're working on that too. Rehabilitation programs, therapy, medical treatment. It won't be easy, and not all of them will make it back to something resembling normal. But they'll have a chance. A chance. Such a small word to contain so much hope. There's something else, David continued. The Alliance is putting together a new task force. Specialists who understand the criminal underworld from the inside. People who can help us identify and stop organizations like the Syndicate before they can do this kind of damage again. He turned to look at her directly. They could use someone with your knowledge and experience. The offer hung in the air between them like a bridge she could choose to cross or burn. Return to a life of violence, even if it was violence in service of justice. Or stay here in this peaceful place and learn to tend gardens instead of graveyards. I'm honored, she said finally. But I think I'm done with that life. I want to try something different. David nodded, and she could see approval in his eyes. I hoped you'd say that. The galaxy has enough warriors, Zara. What it needs more of is gardeners. After he left, she and Thomas sat in comfortable silence, watching the rain continue to fall on his gardens. The water would soak into the soil, nourish the roots, help new growth push toward the light. It was a simple process, but beautiful in its certainty. Thomas, she said eventually. Yes, about those blue flowers you mentioned. When can we start planting them? His smile was brighter than the sun breaking through clouds. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it. I've already prepared the soil. Tomorrow. Such a simple word, but it contained everything she had never dared to hope for. A future that she could choose. A life that she could build with her own hands instead of destroying with them. She thought about the children who would grow up free because of her choice, about the gardens waiting to be planted, about the possibility of redemption blooming like flowers in rich earth. For the first time in 20 years, Zarachin looked forward to tomorrow. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the world clean and preparing it for new growth. In the distance, thunder rumbled like the echo of old wars finally ending, and somewhere in Thomas's greenhouse, seeds were quietly beginning to sprout, reaching toward a light that would never stop shining. She was home,